Take a quick glance at this vehicle. Just take a look. A curved roofline, 3 small chrome slats spanning the front grille, a design so conventional that you'd pass 10 of them without giving a second thought. This vehicle is a Ford Anglia 100E, and I want you to grasp a vital point before we proceed. This unremarkable little family saloon altered Ford's path in Great Britain more than almost any other vehicle the automaker built during that decade. Hardly anyone frames it that way. No one places it on a pedestal. You won't find it featured on bedroom posters, yet by the time this video finishes, you will view this ordinary machine in an entirely new light. Here is the core promise. Beneath that plain, modest exterior, a quiet conflict was underway, a tug-of-war between progressive engineering and economic reality, between what Ford aimed to build and what Ford could realistically afford to produce. How that compromise unfolded silently dictated the landscape of British motoring throughout the remainder of the 1950s. Stick around, because as we dig deeper, this narrative takes some fascinating turns. Let's return to the true starting point of this story. Not 1953, the year of its debut, but well before then. In the immediate aftermath of World War II, Britain during the early 1950s was still recovering. Post-war rationing remained in place. Household budgets were tight, staying strained far longer than most citizens anticipated. Ford's offering for the average family back then was, quite frankly, ancient history. The previous Anglia, the E494A, relied on a framework dating back before wartime. Upright, boxy, featuring the classic sit-up and beg stance where the driver sat elevated while the wings protruded distinctly on both sides. It utilized a tiny 933cc motor outputting just 23 horsepower. It was inexpensive. It was dependable in its own stubborn, retro manner. However, it was not contemporary and everyone realized it. Even Ford recognized the problem. Consequently, when the 100E, debuted in 1953, unveiled at the Paris Motor Show that autumn, it appeared to represent a massive leap forward. The 2-door Anglia arrived first, with the 4-door Prefect following several months later as a slightly higher spec sibling, built upon the identical platform, distinguished primarily by exterior chrome. A small aircraft motif on the Prefect's hood rather than the Anglia's stylized arrow, plus a somewhat upgraded interior. Now here is the detail few people discuss today, the element that gives this narrative real substance. Focus on this aspect. The plant responsible for building it, Ford's Dagenham complex, was far more than an ordinary auto factory. Situated on reclaimed land along the River Thames, it functioned almost like a self-contained industrial island. The site forged its own steel directly from raw ore, while generating its own electricity and gas on location. During that era, it was viewed as the most intricate automotive manufacturing facility in all of Europe. Reflect on that reality for a moment. This humble little Anglia was rolling off the line at one of the most advanced, self-reliant industrial operations on the entire continent. A modest compact sedan created inside a remarkably ambitious production engine that most drivers never even considered. It is worth noting that Ford did not invent unitized body design specifically for this model. The larger console and Zephyr saloons had already introduced monocoque construction to the British lineup earlier in the decade as premium, higher-priced flagships. What rendered the 100E truly significant was Ford taking that same costly, modern structural concept and pushing it down into the budget segment, into a vehicle that an everyday working household could genuinely hope to afford. That was no minor gamble. That was an automaker betting that modern engineering belonged in everyone's driveway, not merely wealthy neighborhoods. The vehicle was far from a simple cosmetic update slapped onto an aging foundation. This marked the inaugural time Ford brought monocoque, fully integrated body construction into its entry-level British range. There was no longer a heavy, separate chassis ladder underneath with a body shell bolted above it. The body itself functioned as the load-bearing frame, lighter, far more rigid, and significantly cheaper to assemble at scale. Once manufacturing tooling was established, it also introduced a novel front suspension architecture featuring coil springs and internal shock absorbers, a Ion setup that would soon gain worldwide recognition as the McPherson strut. Hydraulic brakes replaced outdated mechanical linkage cables. The electrical network upgraded to a 12-volt layout. On paper, this was a thoroughly modern small car, arguably more advanced beneath its skin than any budget model Ford had previously offered in Britain. Yet here is where the story grows compelling. Here is the specific detail left out of sales brochures. Underneath all that brand new structural engineering, Ford retained the old power plant. It relied on the same basic 1,172cc side valve 4-cylinder updated with sturdier bearings, larger intake valves, and pump-driven water cooling, yet remaining fundamentally an old-style engine, already regarded as dated by 1953 standards. Generating 36 horsepower to propel, a vehicle weighing approximately 737 kilograms, it was coupled to a 3-speed manual transmission at a time when rival manufacturers were adopting 4-speed gearboxes. Certain buyers could order an optional semi-automatic system called the Manumatic, an effort to modernize driving ease without altering the aging power unit beneath. Compare it directly with its predecessor, and the contrast becomes immediately stark. The old upright Anglia appeared straight out of the 1930s, tall, slender, with separate bolt-on fenders boasting visible assembly seams. By contrast, the 100E displayed smooth, continuous bodywork running from front to back, representing one of Ford of Britain's first dedicated 3-box sedan silhouettes with integrated running boards and a wide, low engine bay. Even those 3 horizontal chrome bars running across the grille acted like a styling statement, a minor, decorative touch signaling a vehicle designed for a new decade rather than a surplus remnant from the previous era. This reveals the real story behind the 100E, a modern architectural house erected around an aging motor. Ford invested capital, where consumers could readily see and feel the improvements, the exterior line, the refined ride, cockpit comfort, and contemporary aesthetics, while quietly conserving resources on the primary component that propelled the machine forward. It is a familiar philosophy. If you have ever bought a product that looked brand new on the surface, yet felt remarkably familiar underneath, let's discuss what daily life was actually like behind the wheel. On the inside, seating was upholstered in durable PVC vinyl, simple to wipe clean following muddy family outings. On 2-door Anglia models, the front seats tilted forward to allow passengers to squeeze into the back. Heating units and radios were extra cost options rather than standard features, because in 1953 Britain, those amenities were considered minor luxuries that ordinary buyers debated carefully. The wheelbase spanned just 87 inches, the shortest dimension across the entire Anglia family, making the car nimble and easy to maneuver along tight country lanes. However, on wet road surfaces, that compact wheelbase paired with direct, 2-turn steering could cause the tail end to feel noticeably lively if you drove carelessly. Here is another candid detail revealing Ford's underlying manufacturing strategy. The windshield wipers operated via engine, vacuum pressure pulled directly from the intake. Manifold, a low-cost, straightforward arrangement, but one featuring a notorious drawback. Step heavily on the throttle while ascending a steep hill in heavy rain, and the wiper blades would slow dramatically, nearly stalling at the precise moment clear vision mattered most. Drivers back then simply adapted to the quirk. Ford would not implement proper electric wiper motors until the subsequent generation of the Anglia debuted. It stands as a tiny engineering compromise that summarizes the whole car. Modern where it influenced showroom sales, conservative where it didn't lose Ford a single customer. Now consider some concrete, verified performance data rather than marketing rhetoric or nostalgic memory. When The Motor magazine evaluated an late model 100E back in 1959, testers recorded a top speed reaching 73.8 miles per hour. Acceleration from 0 to 60 mph required 26.9 seconds, which illustrates what typical performance meant for a mid-century family car. Fuel economy averaged approximately 41.2 miles per gallon, while the total purchase cost for that test car, including purchase tax, came to £610 sterling, of which £180 was government tax. For an average working household in post-war Britain, that represented a significant sum of hard-earned savings spent on a vehicle that rival models were already surpassing in technical sophistication. Before we continue, if you enjoy this style of grounded automotive history, consider hitting that subscribe button right now. This channel focuses on the unpretentious machines that quietly shaped everyday transportation, rather than focusing solely on the exotic supercars everyone else covers. And if you recall traveling in a car like this, or if your parents or grandparents drove one, share your thoughts in the comment section below. I truly value reading those personal memories. Adding a quick thumbs up also helps this video reach other enthusiasts who appreciate stories of this kind. Reflect on what purchasing a brand new vehicle actually signified for a family back then. This was no impulse purchase financed on a quick loan. In post-war Britain, acquiring a saloon represented years of disciplined budgeting, placing money aside every week, and choosing transportation over other household necessities. When that Anglia finally parked outside the home, or alongside the curb in front of a terraced house, given that many families lacked private driveways altogether. It was far more than simple transportation. It stood as tangible evidence that life was gradually improving. It served as a rolling symbol that hard times were finally easing their grip. Ford did not simply release the 100E and leave it static. The company continuously expanded the model lineup built upon its foundation. In 1955, station wagon variants arrived. The Escort estate based on the Anglia, alongside the higher-tier Squire based on the four-door Prefect, featuring decorative faux wood, side panels and a two-piece, horizontal tailgate that required relocating the fuel tank beneath the floor. Compact Thames. Commercial vans utilized the identical platform to serve local tradespeople and delivery fleets across the nation, forming the unglamorous backbone of small British businesses. Then in 1957, Ford introduced a mid-cycle update across the range. Upgrades included revised taillights, an enlarged rear windscreen, a simplified mesh grille replacing the heavy 3-bar layout, a redesigned instrument panel, and for a brief period, buyers could specify a clutchless, manual control termed Newton. Drive, a rare option today that remains a fascinating novelty for collectors. This was not a car that arrived briefly and faded away. It maintained a steady, expanding presence across vans, estate wagons, and suburban driveways throughout an entire decade of British motoring, gradually becoming an accepted fixture of daily life. That brings us to the defining climax of this story. The fundamental reason this modest saloon mattered so much. By the time production ceased in 1959, Ford had manufactured 345,841 units of the 100E Anglia saloon alone, without factoring in the Prefect estate versions, or commercial vans assembled on the same Dagenham lines. Let that figure register for a moment. Over 345,000 examples of a vehicle whose mechanical underpinnings were visibly lagging behind competitors like the Fiat 1100 or the updated Morris Minor with its modern 1000cc overhead valve engine. Auto journalists recognized it. Enthusiasts understood it. This was by no means the most advanced compact car on British highways by 1959, yet it sold in immense numbers, month after month. Include the four-door Prefect built on the selfsame architecture, exceeding 100,000 units on its own, and the true magnitude of Dagenham's output becomes clear. Across the entire lifespan of the Anglia, nameplate from the pre-war era through the mid-1960s, Ford eventually produced nearly 1.5 million units. The 100E sits right at the center of that legacy as the model that proved high-volume monocoque manufacturing was profitable. Here lies the uncomfortable truth behind those massive production figures. This unpretentious, retro-engine compact was the product actually generating revenue. It was the dependable workhorse keeping Dagenham's assembly lines operating at full capacity, funding tooling investments, keeping dealership networks supplied, and keeping personnel employed while Ford secretively engineered a far more revolutionary replacement behind closed doors. That successor, the radical Anglia 105E, launched in 1959, arrived featuring bold tail fins, inspired by American styling trends, a distinctive reverse-angled rear window unlike anything British drivers had seen, a modern overhead valve engine, and a striking image that would make it iconic. During its first full production year, the 105E established a company record by exceeding 190,000 sales in a single year. However, that landmark model could never have been launched without the 100E, maintaining financial stability first. The unglamorous vehicle executed the unglamorous labor. It sustained Ford of Britain through 6 consecutive years of consistent, essential business, generating the manufacturing volume, financial liquidity, and operational expertise required so that a flashier successor could follow in its wake. That is the ultimate lesson within this history. The vehicle remembered as mundane is frequently the exact machine that established the structural bedrock for everything that followed. No one organizes parades for a simple workhorse. No one composes songs about practical sedans, yet remove them from history. And the famous icons never get created in the first place. There is one final dimension to this story, and it is a warm one. Today, the 100E enjoys a thriving second life. Because so many mechanical components were interchangeable across the Anglia, Prefect, Escort Estate, and Thames van ranges, it became a favorite platform among custom hot rodders and classic car restorers. The exact part standardization Ford implemented to lower manufacturing expenses on the factory floor ultimately became a valuable gift to modern enthusiasts, keeping these vintage machines running on roads today. If you remember Britain during the 1950s, there is a strong possibility a car like this once sat outside your family home or belonged to a relative who worked tirelessly to afford it. It was not luxurious, it was not fast off the line, but it was honest, dependable, and uniquely theirs during an era when the nation was rebuilding itself neighborhood by neighborhood. Perhaps that explains why this saloon regularly re-emerges in conversations, at classic car gatherings, in vintage photos taken from family albums, or in personal stories about learning to drive on chilly mornings with vacuum wipers, struggling against the rain. It never demanded historical acclaim. It simply started up, kept running, and transported families to work, church, and coastal beaches every Sunday for 6 years without demanding attention. That is what this history demonstrates in the end. Major automotive transformations do not always arrive with dramatic fanfare. Frequently, a car simply carries out its duty year after year until you look back decades later and appreciate the immense operational weight it quietly supported all along. Here is the central lesson worth reflecting upon. The stylish, glamorous machines earn fame. The unassuming workhorses are quietly forgotten. But if you overlook the steady workhorses, you never truly comprehend how automotive history was actually constructed. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future episodes. Leave a comment sharing what detail impressed you most. The self-sufficient Dagenham steel plant, the ancient engine housed under a modern monocoque body, or those 345,000 ordinary saloons quietly keeping British motoring alive while no one was paying attention. Drop a like on this video if you enjoyed the content, and if you know an enthusiast or family member who remembers 1950s Britain firsthand, share this video with them. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.